Can we go ahead and start with the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Alpine?
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Here.
Commissioner Landon?
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Here.
Commissioner Rohan?
Here.
Commissioner Stevens? Alternate Commissioner Holmes? Alternate Commissioner Carl? Alternate Commissioner Nisley? Alternate Commissioner Starsky? And Chair Burris.
Here. All right, do we have any changes to the agenda order?
No changes from staff.
All right, well, with that being said, can I get a motion to approve the agenda order?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Moving to public comments. This is the section of the agenda for any comments that are on items not included on today's agenda. If anybody has a public comment, now would be the time to come on up to the podium. If you don't mind filling out a speaker card to help with our minutes, that would be incredible, but you do not need to fill one out. Come on up.
You can push the mic for him, yeah.
Good afternoon, Albert Schreiber, and I'll get you a card shortly. The last LAFCO meeting, you guys approved the Sudbury NEQ project to be annexed into the city of Lincoln, and I just wanted to thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. I stood up here the 3 months, previous 3 months, asking you to do that. Not that you did it for me, but I was also trying to cover in my 3 minutes MSR and stuff. So the reason I was so gung-ho for you to approve that project was the Perry portion of that project, which is give or take about half the project, used to belong to me and my family. So we sold that to Mr. Perry around 2012, and like 10 years, ironically 10 years prior to that, we had made a deal with the city. They needed some stuff for the bypass that bisected that property, and so we made an agreement with the city of Lincoln, and that agreement wasn't just a handshake, it was an actual resolution that got passed by the city. And the essence of it was that if that property, regardless of if we owned it or anybody else, was going to be developed, that it could develop separate from everybody else in the city, because the city had this village concept they really liked. And also that it would be done as quick and as cheap as possible. That's what the resolution said. And so when we sold it to Mr. Perry, I think that was a big portion of why he bought the property, because he had that in his hand. Unfortunately, the first thing the city did was make him join with Mr. Gill and his family, which I have nothing against them, but that wasn't part of the deal. It was supposed to be separate. The city also tried to get him to join in with Village 5, which I guess they pushed back enough they didn't have to do that. But here you are, you just approved it over 10 years later. And as all of you know, 10 years is not cheap. So basically the deal that we had with the city that we gave to Mr. Perry when he bought the property, the city didn't live up to their end of the agreement at all, in my opinion. And so that's why I was standing here pushing for that property to be approved. Not that I get any gain out of it, but I felt bad for Mr. Perry not getting what he should have gotten from the city. Oh, and I've had some individual conversations with some of you, which I really appreciate. And Michelle's been very patient with all my silly questions, so I appreciate all your help. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any additional speakers? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be moved on in one blanket motion. If anyone would like, they may remove an item for consent from consent for discussion. Would anybody like to remove an item from consent? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Chair, just to let you know that we do have some corrections on the minutes, and these corrections are related to Commissioner Landon voted and not Commissioner Holmes at the last meeting, or alternate Commissioner Holmes. And so the changes are in front of you, and they're also provided to the public. We'll make those corrections before the chair signs.
Thank you. All right, with that, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Moving to item 6, public hearing on the proposed work plan and budget for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Commissioners. I thought we'd start with the work plan this year because the work plan is really what's driving our budget and the increase to the budget. And I have them grouped. It's not exactly as in your packet because I have them grouped by type here. So for example, these are the different annexations and reorganizations that we'll be processing in the following, hopefully within the fiscal year. Sometimes, projects take longer, but this is the anticipated list of proposals, and some of them are ongoing. I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of them in my EO report, and there are a few items that are new. For studies, we do have a couple of ongoing studies. We have the Western Fire District, which is a big study for us, and now that is on its way. We do have the City of Lincoln that will be coming forward with a sphere update. As you recall, we bifurcated their sphere when the commission approved the SUD B and AQ annexation. And then we have some new ones coming up, which will be funded with the 23-24 budget. That's staff's proposal anyway. And then there's other administrative projects. These are the higher priority, the portion of the administrative projects that are higher priority. It's really working on our policies, our website, which currently is under the county, but there are some limitations with the website and we need more flexibility. And some other features that are not currently available. So we did get a number of quotes, I think 3 or 4 quotes, and so we'll be bringing back a proposal in the next month or 2. And then we, in this ask, we are also asking for another full-time analyst position. It's really to help us process these projects. Now, it's going to be difficult for someone to come in from the street, and chances are you're not going to be able to hire from another LAFCO. So even when you hire someone with some experience, for example, a planner, a county planner, a city planner, et cetera, just to walk into LAFCO, it's, it's, in my opinion, a 2-year learning curve. It just is, because by the time you go through the first year and you see, experience firsthand working on a number of projects, it's not really till the second year when you work on, similar projects again, that those things that, about LAFCO sink in, right? The nuances. So in the beginning, we'll expect that they'll just be processing very standard, non-controversial things that are more routine. And then hopefully we can build them up to take on additional tasks. I do have a meeting with HR in the next week, I believe, to go over some of the details of which classification could work, for example. These are the lower priority items. We'd like to get to these, but as time allows, and so they're listed. It's things like onboarding new commissioners. We do have, well, not really. I mean, Shanti's you're not really that new. But But it's working on those types of more administrative office procedures, things of that nature. Getting to the budget, though, we are requesting a significant increase in our budget, and it's really to fund the new position. It also is to get a new website, and also our A87 costs have gone up steadily, and that's really because we have been requesting the county to provide us additional services, whether it's HR, GIS, payroll, help desk, all of those things. As we engage the county and their staff and they help us, those hours, you'll see it increasing. So I think the first year I was here, it was a little over 4,000, I want to say 4,200, and we're now up to almost 50,000. So, it's not a reflection of the county's costs increasing, it's simply just us engaging their staff more and working together on a number of projects. So to the billing to the cities will increase, and the city of Roseville, they pay about 73% of the share of, or the apportionment of the LAFCO bill, and that's just because they're the largest city. And so they take on the brunt of the cost. I do have a meeting with the city manager next week and to go over some of our proposed work plan and other issues. And then the special districts, it's really PCWA that pays the most significant cost, but it's at 36%, unlike Roseville's 73%. But it is a significant increase to them as well. And I listed some of our other districts that pay into LAFCO the most. Those are the top 6, and then the others, there's too many to list. So they're just all lumped together under all other districts. Then Placer County will see the most significant increase, almost 100,000, and just because they pay the 1/3 of the apportionment. So staff's recommendation is to adopt with modifications the proposed work plan and the budget, and then direct staff to distribute the budget and the work plan to our cities, special districts, and the county, and then and schedule a public hearing for our June meeting.
Okay, well, with that, do we have specific questions from the board for Michelle?
I have a question. I'm just curious, I was reviewing this and then I saw it again here in your presentation. With Roseville paying the lion's share, because they're the largest city in the county, is there a reason, and excuse me if there is, because this is only my first year here, that we don't have an additional seat up here because of the amount that we pay?
So that would have to be agreed to by the other cities. It's part of so the city selection committee meets at least once a year. And so that would have to be taken up by that committee.
All right.
I also have a question on the Roseville. You mentioned that you were going to be meeting with the Roseville manager subsequent to this meeting. Is that a negotiating session? Does he get to say, no, I won't pay that much?
No. In fact, if any agency says no, then we are able to collect from their property tax revenue. So they can't say no. He actually just had some questions about our work plan, and so it's not a negotiation.
I have one.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Shanta.
I was just going to ask, has there already been outreach with all of the jurisdictions? Are they already aware? Or are you waiting for this decision and then the outreach will happen?
I've reached out to the agencies that are paying the most significant portion. We do have 37 special districts, and it would be impossible for me to reach everyone, but they did receive the staff report and the budget, and then I made special requests or special outreach, I guess, to those that paid the most significant portion of our budget.
Okay, thanks.
Cindy?
I had just a question on the special districts. It's based on their budget from last year,
Yes.
So they're seeing two factors. They're seeing if they had a significant change in their budget plus this additional funding for this coming year, correct? Because the
Yes.
proportions are changing within there, and I was like, well, yeah, just looking at the increases weren't the same, but that's because their budgets
Right.
and their share then changed during the year.
Yes, it depends on their revenue.
Right, right, okay.
All right, do we have any additional questions from the board? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Do we have any public comments at this time on the item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for action.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Excuse me, Amy, do you mind doing a roll call? Sure. It's a budget item.
Oh,
Commissioner Alpine,
Yes.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Yes.
Commissioner Landon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendoza,
Yes.
Commissioner Rohan,
Yes.
Alternate Commissioner Carl,
Yes.
and Chair Burris.
yes. All right, we're going to go to item 7, business items, starting with item A, appointment of public member. Michelle, do you have a presentation for this?
I do not, just that the committee met and the unanimous recommendation from the committee was to reappoint Commissioner Rohan, and that they will interview the top candidates for the alternate.
away because she doesn't want the appointment?
And that they will, sorry, I was distracted, and that they will interview the top applicants. One of our members, thank you, one of our members on the committee, Commissioner Stevens, is out of the country with spotty Wi-Fi, so when he gets back, we'll schedule the interviews.
Wonderful. Well, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the board for comments, and then we'll take some public comment and back for action. No comments? All right.
Well, is she willing?
Do we have any public comments on the item? All right, seeing none, back to the board for action.
I'll move approval.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, it's official. You're back up here again.
Welcome back.
Yeah, do we need to do an official swearing in, or?
No, we have them sign an oath of office.
Okay.
And so we anticipate the interviews within the next month, is that?
Yes, I'm hoping, I don't remember when Commissioner Stevens said that he would be back, but I'm assuming in the next week or two,
Yeah.
and then we can schedule.
So we should have it before the May meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we will move to the executive officer's report.
So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the projects that we have underway. One is the Meeks Bay North Tahoe reorganization that you saw in your project status report, and also SPMUD, which is the South Placer Municipal Utilities District. I'm not sure why I didn't spell it out, but it's for South Placer MUD, which is a sewer district. So just to back up a little bit, I know we've talked about this before, but this is for the North Bay and Meeks Bay reorganization. So what we're doing with that project, or what the district is proposing, is we annex Meeks Bay into North Tahoe, and then we dissolve Meeks Bay. So it's a reorganization because there's two actions, right? The dissolution and the annexation. And so where we're at in the process is, the two agencies, the two districts, they submitted a resolution to initiate the reorganization. And then that resolution has been given to LAFCO. So between the districts adopting the resolution and the LAFCO meeting, there's a number of steps that take place. And one of them is the Revenue Tax Code 99 tax exchange process. We'll go back to this flow chart in a little bit, but I'm going to focus on the Revenue Tax Code 99, which is where we're at in the process. Okay, so So there's a number of agencies that are, and departments within the agencies that are working on the tax exchange. First, the Placer LAFCO, because we're the principal county and the principal LAFCO, initiated the rev and tax process. And so that was completed, and then the auditor, the assessor provides the assessed valuation to the auditor, and then the auditor does the estimates for what the amounts are that are subject to negotiations. So that part has been completed. You'll see that it was done, El Dorado completed theirs in November of 2022. And then with those estimates, then that goes to the county exec office, which is the El Dorado Placer County Exec's office and the Placer County Exec's office. And then they conduct the negotiations, and they must come to an agreement, adopt resolutions, and then submit those resolutions to LAFCO. Now, the law does allow them an extension, which, it puts us around February 8th of 2023. It was due on January. They asked for an extension. We allowed the extension, but we're still in that part of the negotiation. So back to why is it important that the negotiations take place? Because it's not just the property tax that's being impacted, right? So part of LAFCO's action will be to, so the Meeks Bay property tax will continue to be assessed, right? And then the portion of the 1%, right? So I think for Meeks Bay, they receive about 5 to 7%, depending on the TRA, of the 1%. So that will continue if they're in North Tahoe. The special tax will be eliminated, and what will replace it is the North Tahoe special tax, because remember that Meeks Bay is dissolved, they no longer exist. There is no longer an entity that can collect those taxes. And then the special assessment, same thing, it will go away, but we will have the North Tahoe special assessment replace that source of revenue. And then there's an existing contract between Meeks Bay and North Tahoe, which will go away, but then, of course, that'll be offset by the reduction of service contract expense, right? So it's a wash. So when we had our consultant run the numbers of what that would look like post-reorganization, what the revenues would look like once we have a combined district. And by the way, these, I think we've discussed these studies, but if anybody wants a copy, we do have them, and then we'll have them again once it gets to the LAFCO hearing. But that's where this information is from the AP Triton study, which was approved by the North Tahoe Board in August 23rd, 2022. So if we project out the revenues for the next 5 years, this is what that looks like, around 18.5 to 20.5 million. And then we start looking at the projected expenditures. Again, this is just transferring over the special tax, the special assessment. They continue receiving the 5 to 7% of the 1%. So when you do the revenues minus expenditures, you come up with a negative. So every single year, if we combine them and there is no new source of revenue other than what's being transferred through the LAFCO process, we see that about 150 to a little over 200,000 in deficit spending every single year. So back to where we're at in the process. So those negotiations are happening at this moment between the two counties. Now, there's still the rest of the LAFCO process to get through. There's still the meeting. There's the conducting authority proceeding, which is the protest hearing, right? Because we have to give the residents or not residents, voters and landowners a right to protest And then there may be an election, if, depending on the outcome of the protest. Or the project could be approved or it could be denied. And then there's the closing out the project, right? So we have a long ways to go. But where we're at right now is essentially in the same situation where we've been since December, or the first week of December. So that's where we're at. I was hoping that we could have this item before you this spring, before the fire season, so that the two districts could be, they would know a path forward beginning July 1st for their next fiscal year, whether that's the voters said no, or the project is approved. But I was hoping that we could have a resolution. Unfortunately, I think it'll be closer to the end of the calendar year before we have that.
I had a couple questions. So first off, a compliment. Michelle, as you know, what you didn't tell in the history was that originally El Dorado County LAFCO was approached to run this process.
Yes.
And El Dorado County LAFCO also lost their executive director about the same time. And so they then said, well, Placer County LAFCO, will you take it on? And you had just joined, as I recall.
Yes.
And it was handed to you. And so thank you and your staff, because this was, two counties and a lot of challenges. So thank you for what you've done. When you talk about the months and the tax sharing, right before the meeting, you said you had gotten a call that maybe El Dorado was ready to adjust and understand that they have a deficit, the county, with our county. I know we've been in discussions with El Dorado County, but they also were going through a transition with their CEO.
Yes.
So the delays have been unfortunate, but you've got you've got a transition of a CEO as you're trying to negotiate a pretty contentious issue of this property tax issue. I know that both counties see the value in the consolidations of the districts, but we can't ask Placer County residents or North Tahoe Fire District residents to pick up the deficits created that caused the reason for El Dorado County Fire District to be underwater here. And so I just want to make that clear, that I think you've done an excellent job. And some of these delays have been inevitable because of, first off, we weren't the lead to begin with, then we became the lead, and then their CEO transitioned. So some of these are very challenging policy questions for their Board of Supervisors as well. But I had a conversation with my counterpart in El Dorado County. She's a brand new supervisor, so she's coming up to speed as well, representing their 5th district. And she sees the merit in moving this forward and wants to support it. I believe she has support, but I think these are all the complicated negotiations that go on to really make sure we get this right and no one is picking up a deficit. So from the time, if they were ready to go in the next month with the negotiations, if we reached a resolution between the two counties, it still then takes you till the end of the year to enact it, you think, or for our process?
I hope not. There is some timing considerations. For example, the LAFCO hearing, we need to notice all of the registered voters and all of the landowners, so there's some time. And you have to give them at least 21 days notice.
And that's for both districts, or just?
Yes.
Yes, so for both districts, every registered voter has to be notified. Wow.
Right, and it's we can hire another third party to do that, so it's not like we're
Yeah.
doing that in-house.
You're not licking the envelopes and
Thank
putting
goodness,
stamps
no.
on them?
But it does still take time, and then once it's approved at LAFCO, or if it's approved at LAFCO, right, then there's the protest hearing.
Okay.
And then again, it's the noticing in 21 days. But if we can get those negotiations, or those resolutions with the negotiated agreements, then the sooner we get them, the sooner we can process at LAFCO.
Well, right before the meeting, you mentioned you'd gotten a call and that maybe there was a quick resolution that could happen with El Dorado County. I did check with our county staff in the meantime, who said they set the meeting. El Dorado County requested the meeting for June 1st.
Yes.
So that's another month and a half here until that meeting can occur.
Right, and that was what I based my comment on about the end of the year. But if they can come to a negotiated or an
If we can
agreement,
expedite that meeting, then we can start to save some time.
right?
Okay.
Yes, and just to back up a little bit, really, where the source of the deficit is the unfunded accrued liability from
Absolutely.
CalPERS.
Yeah.
You know, and it's 2.5 million, and so the district is paying about 200,000 a year to pay that unfunded liability, right? And so if that goes away, then we don't have the deficit,
Well, I think, here's the question.
potentially.
Yeah, you know where I'm going?
I think I know exactly.
I think
where
Cindy's
you're
saying all the quiet parts out loud right now.
Well, I think what I'm trying to get on the record is that we will have a new evaluation from CalPERS based on their investments that could change that amount of that unfunded liability for all counties and special districts and cities, right? I mean, we get our evaluation in the June,
June, I think.
June of each year.
Was that a motivator for the timing on that meeting then?
Well, it begs the question, if you agree to an agreement June 1 and you get your assessment 3 weeks later that says, whoops, we've lost this much in our investment.
I mean, your agreement could be,
Whatever the amount is at the time of the,
right, until it's paid off,
right,
until it's zero.
okay. Thank you, I'm sorry to belabor that, but I know.
No,
I see the chief is on, and I know that you had gotten a call, and I just wanted to make sure I was clear on anything we could do from Placer County side to help expedite this. Thank you.
And Michelle, do we have any issues with the fact we issued a 30-day extension and we're now very clearly beyond that?
No, there is no. If the two agencies don't come to a resolution, then the process is that we hire a mediator,
Okay,
and then, so which can be costly and et cetera. And so we can go that route.
so we're
but we
hoping
were-
it doesn't resort to that.
Right, exactly. It's, it's less expensive if we can agree amongst ourselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to another item, which is the out-of-area service agreements. Or sometimes they're called out-of-agency extension of services. It's the same thing, but it's basically, contracts between an agency such as a city and a special district and landowners to serve areas outside of their district. So I wanted to go back in time a little bit and give you a little bit of LAFCO history. So before 1994, LAFCO's authority included annexations, attachments, changes of organizations, reorganizations, incorporations, formations of special districts, et cetera. But what was not subject to LAFCO review was when a city or special district was extending municipal services outside of their boundary. But this all changed and with the Gotch bill. And it made a number of changes to the LAFCO law. One is the 56133. So I will say that we could have a workshop, like a 2-day, 3-day workshop just on this code section. And so it's very complicated. There's a lot of ongoing litigation throughout the state on various portions or various areas of this. And there's been a number of litigations since the mid-90s as a result of this section. So I just will give a very brief overview. So in summary, what 56133 says is that a city or district has to come to LAFCO to request approval to provide services outside of their boundary. Now, there's only two ways, right? So within a sphere of influence, it's in anticipation of a change of organization. So if they were to come back later and do the annexation, like this is, you know, for example, which you'll see in a little bit, we have a sewer district which they don't have a current sphere, they don't have a current MSR, but this area is clearly next to their existing boundary, it's in their sphere, and so we were able to make those findings. Another option is if a district or city wants to provide to a landowner and that property is outside of the sphere of influence, there has to be an impending threat or an existing threat to health and public safety. So for example, at least in my other LAFCO, what was common is a well would go dry. So maybe not so common here because we don't have those problems, but so then it's a threat, right? And so it's urgent, and so we just submit documentation from the public health officer, well is dry, we need to connect, and they're the closest resource, this city or this district. So those are the two situations where LAFCO can allow the extension. And like I said, there's a lot of nuances, and it's, you know, very complicated, but that's the basic. Now, there are some exemptions. For example, when two public agencies provide the same services and they can contract as an alternative, right? If it's two sewer districts, for example, or two water districts. Now, and that's for treated water, because non-potable water and ag water is exempt. You do not have to go through LAFCO. If you're, for example, for NID, the Nevada Irrigation Districts, in certain parts of the county, they only provide non-treated water. And so that water is not subject to LAFCO review, or non-potable water is not. But that's for not treated water, non-treated water. So again, and then there's also, if the district or a city was already providing those services before 2001, they were grandfathered in. So you'll notice that it's after 1994, so they were given a chance to finish some of those contracts that were in the works. And then we will talk more extensively about 56134, which is fire contracts, but those are also subject to LAFCO approval. For example, if you have a city contracting all of its fire services to a county fire department, that needs to go through LAFCO. So we have seen since my time here, and I didn't realize how, I guess, how popular this type of service is in this county. And so but one of the first projects, you'll notice here, is October 13, 2021. One of the first projects I worked on was an out-of-area extension of services. And with this, it was the first exemption where, let me just show you the map. This is Boyington Road running along 80, you see there, and then it's the district's boundary, SPMUD's boundary is that solid gray, and the proposal area was the hash line. The other, want to point out that one of the conditions of approval that the commission adopted was for the district to come in with an annexation at a later time. Now, they have since asked for an extension, and the reason why is because LAFCO will not be conducting their municipal service review and sphere of influence until this year with the 23-24 budget. So we did allow the extension. But unfortunately, what I found is there's a number of districts, and it's really the smaller districts in some of our smaller cities that may not have been aware of this law. And so I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention that, you know, that really we need to be, we should be receiving these applications. Now, the applications are on our website, and if you have questions, please reach out to me. But FYI, you cannot extend services outside of your boundary without LAFCO's approval.
So Michelle, obviously we have a lot of cleanup we've been doing and a lot more cleanup to do. So in these situations, which I'm sure there's a very long list of where this is already occurring,
Yes.
what is our cleanup protocol for that? What are our next steps going forward with the identification of these contracts that are not compliant?
Right, and with to bring them into compliance, right? Whether it's an annexation, et cetera, or just an extension of services, and right, there are costs involved, and so sometimes there's the study, the annexation itself, a map, a description, and it can be very expensive. So I think that we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis, because as I mentioned, a lot of these districts and cities, they're smaller and they may not be able to pay the cost.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering, especially when servicing outside of the districts, aren't there other rules governing, especially in that legislation? I believe there used to be one about what can actually be charged. I don't think if you're expending a service outside of your service district, there's other things that come into play that may affect the way they pay for that service. That shouldn't be the same. They're not considered equal. I know in the past, if you were moving services outside of the district boundaries, there was clauses in the past of where the people receiving that service outside of the boundary would have to pay a premium on their costs for some of the things. I believe that was encoded at the time. I don't know if that 1993 legislation has taken that away. So
for example, NID, they are able to charge higher fees for those services that are outside of their boundary. So, but that's, under their purview, not under LAFCO's purview.
But how about under irrigation? Well, that's just water. I was also kind of going down sewer.
Yeah.
Right.
In,
So that's
actually
another
my
way,
question.
and some
So-
other different services that are outside, because sometimes in those services, there are things that cover costs, staff time, that usually benefits, so in a way, you could have the entity that's in the service is subsidizing staff time for the service outside of the district disproportionately. So it was just something that came up. I was wondering if if this new legislation 93 took care of that.
That might be something worth digging into more for a future presentation.
Yeah.
Because
Because it's going to be touchy on some of the special districts,
No,
especially how
absolutely.
irrigation districts, or certain kind of state statutory districts.
Well,
how
just,
district is created.
Just because I've been working with Carrie at SPMUD, I know, for example, that if there's a sewer line within 300 feet of your property, you must connect. And so when you're extending those sewer lines, right, it's like, well, it's just one. But now you're triggering, right, this potential for growth. So it is very nuanced, and we will have to examine each individual project and each cleanup item on a case-by-case basis. There is no blanket, but again, what I wanted to highlight is the fact that they should be applying to LAFCO, and then we'll review on a case-by-case basis. I'm sorry, Michael, I saw you wanted to speak and I talked.
That's okay, Michelle. I just wanted to address the commissioner's question. The funding issue isn't in this particular section, 56-133, so it would be in those things like Prop 218 and the other laws that govern the charging for services and fees that would have to be worked out between the entities involved.
Thank you, Michael.
Perfect. Were there any additional questions from the board on Michelle's presentation?
Yes, but now I can't be as intelligent as Mr. Alpine was in presenting specific cases. What we're talking about here is a collection of arrangements that some may have been in existence for some time.
Right, and so if they existed before 2001, they were grandfathered in. What I've seen are pretty recent cases where, you know, they self-exempt,
Okay,
and that's not.
I haven't, you're giving me a better answer than I may deserve. These arrangements may not be in compliance with what the statute says, but that's can you give me an example of what harm an existing arrangement
Sure.
would lead to, and why are we talking about imposing costs on small government entities that don't
So-
have the resources to comply?
No, I absolutely 100% sympathize with the cost. You know, for a simple annexation, you can, because if you don't have a sphere, if you don't have a study, it can be $30,000 by the time you pay for all of that. So why is it important? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first one, let me just give you examples with some of our cities. Let's just take Auburn, not because we're here in Auburn, not because I'm picking on them, but you have North Auburn, right? When you have the address, it says Auburn, California. Some of them receive services. And what people don't understand is they're not in the boundary. You can't vote. If there's an increase, say, I don't know this, but if they're receiving water, services for water, right, from Auburn City, which obviously that's not the case, I'm just using it as an example, and now the city says, you know what, we're gonna quadruple our rates. And those homeowners are like, wait, no, we can't afford that. They can't say no. It
Well,
happens
we can pick on
to them.
Colfax for a minute because that has actually happened. We, specifically with our sewer system, we have people who are by state law required to connect because they're within 300 feet, because if you look at our city boundaries, we are one big bubble with two little bubbles, for whatever reason, islanded completely outside. And one of those bubbles is our wastewater treatment plant. So all those people connected between our plant and our actual city limits are not able to vote. They can't recall me if they don't like how I do my job. They have no say, but they're connected and they have to pay the fee.
But they did vote down the 218 though.
Right.
And they did vote it down because majority of the people lived outside. And they were also passed on a 20% differential.
Yes.
Which was never passed on, which was
Which they're not
to other
paying.
people. So there's like a whole lot of things that are not really good, but in that case. But there is a recent bunch, I know for a fact, the multiple mobile home parks within our county have been getting letters and receiving grant applications to connect to various water systems and wastewater systems. And I'm just wondering how this rules would how this these new laws or these laws would affect some of those processes. Because I think right now the owners in the special districts or the ones providing services are doing direct talks and writing and negotiating service agreements. We may have to reach out to the state board and seeing where they're already making those connections. So at least we're already aware that if we're supposed to be managing those, that they're aware of the process that we should be getting put in the loop here.
Right.
How do they find out? You're saying, we're having this meeting here, and your recommendation or advice to us is all of these entities or arrangements, which seems to involve an awful lot of individual homeowners who may not even be aware of why they're in the Colfax bubble for the sanitation district, or that they vote or don't vote. And you're saying you guys all ought to come in. How, we have no media here. How would you get, are you talking about sending out notices to every one of them, or what?
No, it's usually what we're seeing is a district or a homeowner saying, hey, you're not showing my property in this boundary. and we get services. We have a meter out front. Okay, where's the annexation record? And then there is no annexation record, and then the district they wanted to be neighborly. And so they extended the services, potable water services. And then we're just seeing during the election period, so November, or I guess September, October, there were people that were pulling. They wanted to run for city council. They wanted to run for various boards. It's like, no, you're not in the boundary. Yes, you receive services, but you're not within those boundaries. So that's a lot of times it's because they think there's something wrong. Like, you're not showing me inside the city limits. You're not showing me inside the boundary. Why? Well, because you got those services with a handshake or something written from the agency, but you didn't go through LAFCO. It didn't go to the state for the TRA change. So that's how we're finding them. So there isn't, Amy and I are not auditing every single parcel. It's mostly what we're seeing is people are coming to us and there's some sort of a problem, and then we look and it's like, oh gosh, you should have gone through us. Not that you should not have received the service, right? It's just that you didn't go through LAFCO.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. This was definitely very educational, and it might be worth doing a follow-up at some point on this, with just sort of a status on some of these.
Yeah, and I really, I don't want to cause these special districts and cities to have to pay thousands of dollars, and so that's why I'd like to come back on a, case-by-case basis and not do some blanket, this is what we're going to do, and, there's just, it's just too costly for some of these agencies and homeowners.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we brought it up, because there is some things that are, like I said, the state water board, both on the clean water and on the wastewater side, have already engaged property owners, the small parks, about coming up with solutions to failing systems. And those agencies need to be aware that part of the cost borne to clean up, or to part of the solution, is filing that, is
There's
the
grants
application
available.
process with LAFCO. And I
Right.
think that's where we're just trying to stir, make sure we don't have, where we get that cost recognized up front, and it doesn't become later down in the process, and then it becomes a burden to everybody, especially when there's already money allocated for the processing of this work. So,
Well, and I think another solution also is to make sure our special districts, our cities, and our county understand this when
Going
we are
forward.
approached, and educating those organizations as well. And so you're doing a good job by educating us, but we may need to reach out to our
Absolutely.
partners to make sure they're aware of the requirement.
Right.
Michelle, you said you're dealing with these on a case-by-case basis, and you're dealing with those in a way because they're coming to you, or you're not going out to find them, they're coming to you with an issue or a question, and then you realize, just out of curiosity, do we have rough numbers? How many of these are we seeing?
So, for example, with the South Placer MUD, I think there are 8. So not a huge number that I know of. We haven't dug too deep. Sometimes it's a little scary what you find, but for sure there's 8, and you'll see that coming in the next few months. With another water district, I saw about 20 acres where they've extending potable water, and maybe they should not have. And then the other problem too, sorry, I didn't finish my thought, with why it's important. Because, for example, in some cases, you have existing service providers, right? Where you have now 2 districts that could potentially serve this area. So, now it's like, well, we need to detach from this district and annex to your district if you want to continue. And then really those districts should have been given an opportunity to say yay, nay, because it's in their boundary. So now you've got, you're creating this competition, and, you know, and doing it not out in the open, like if we were to be discussing a reorganization, which is a detachment and an annexation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So did you have additional content from your report?
Oh, yes, sorry. One more item I'd like to add, which is the omnibus bill from LAFCO. It's really just a couple of things this year. One would allow LAFCO to email, it says transmit resolutions, so mail, email, whichever works. And then the other, for the LAFCO, and then the other item was to sync up 56658 with Revenue Tax Code 99, that tax exchange process. So the process stays the same, is just now it's reflected in both code sections.
Did you need a letter of support from our board for that?
Yes, if they could authorize the chair, if your board could authorize the chair to sign the omnibus bill. There is a draft at the dais and also out in the audience.
And we don't need a special item for that. We can actually take the general consensus at this point, correct?
Right, if you have objections, but again, this is the omnibus bill. There is no substantial changes.
So no,
I'm fine with that.
okay, perfect. So
No objections.
It sounds like we're good to go on that one.
Okay, thank you. And that's it for my report, unless you have other questions on any of the projects we're working on.
Okay. All right, do we have comments or questions from any commissioners?
I just wanted to take time to thank you for support for reappointment to the commission. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, we're happy to have you. All right, well, with that, if we have no further comments, we are adjourned. Thank you.